Some crop circles have had direct information in them. There was one very famous one in 2002 that looked like the classic alien holding a disc of a binary code.
In fields across the world, strange designs appear overnight, too perfect, too vast, too mathematically precise for a casual prank. Some claim it's art, others call it a hoax. Yet researchers studying geometry, plant biology, and coded messages say one thing keeps surfacing. Not all of it adds up. Could these circles really carry a message? Some appear to encode universal constants, star maps, even warnings. If the patterns are not ours, then whose are they? Today, we dig into the mystery that the world tried to dismiss. The Tully saucer nest. Every great mystery has an origin story, and when it comes to crop circles, many people assume it all began with pranksters and planks in the English countryside during the 1970s and 80s. But the record tells a different tale. Long before the word crop circle hit headlines, a farmer in Queensland, Australia, stumbled upon something that still unsettles researchers today. On January 19, 1966, George Pedley was driving his tractor across Horseshoe Lagoon near the town of Tully.
This man, George Pedley, has been haunted for nearly 30 years by something that he saw here.
It was a clear morning until a strange hissing sound broke the silence. Startled, he looked up and saw something he would never forget, a metallic disc rising from the reeds. Within seconds, the object shot skyward, leaving behind a swirling disturbance. When Pedley inspected the spot, he found a circle nearly 30 feet across pressed into the reeds, every stalk bent into a clockwise spiral but not broken. The plants lay smooth and intact, as though gently molded into place by a force he couldn't see. This wasn't just a farmer's tale. Pedley immediately reported the incident, and within days, the Royal Australian Air Force launched an official investigation. Their records, which were declassified years later, show the site was carefully mapped, measured, and photographed. Investigators noted the precision of the formation: a perfect ring, no footprints, no machinery tracks, no signs of fire or chemical damage. The reeds were bent at their nodes, not crushed, just as later researchers would document in European circles decades later. Locals called it a saucer nest, a term used for similar circles reported in wetlands during the rainy season. Yet none had ever been seen forming until Pedley's account. That first-hand witness testimony, paired with physical evidence and government documentation, made the Tully case stand out. Unlike the hoaxes that would later dominate headlines, this was not a prank confessed years after the fact. It was an official, contemporary report backed by multiple forms of evidence. The remaining factors somehow made the Tully nest all the more interesting. The features themselves were reminiscent of those later observed in unexplained crop circles: clockwise swirls, bent but unbroken stems, sharp edges where the effect suddenly stopped at the circle's periphery. Such uniformities imply that it is an adventitious phenomenon, operating with calculatedness and not random weather or human-induced trickery. There may be skeptics claiming whirlwinds or waterspouts have crafted such a nest, but no unusual conditions regarding winds have been established by meteorologists after checking the data at the time. The reeds do not, as storms often do, leave behind an arbitrary scatter, but neatly spiral. This kind of thing disturbs researchers. It's as if something can selectively act on the plant. In the months that followed Pedley's report, similar nests were seen in nearby locations in Queensland and New South Wales. Each of them was characterized by the same signature traits: stems bent at the nodes, no footprints, and mathematically perfect circles. This phenomenon had been recorded years before the cultural craze for crop circles, regardless of whether some unexplained natural force or less ordinary phenomenon was behind it. The Tully case became, decades later, a litmus test for investigators like Colin Andrews, proof that not every circle could be put down to human troublemaking. Then it established a scientific benchmark for what a genuine unexplained formation might look like. The reeds of Horseshoe Lagoon were more than just flattened plants. They were the first pages in a mystery still unfolding. If formations like the Tully nest predate the pranksters, then what do we make of the circles that appear to encode advanced mathematics, patterns too complex for chance? geometry in the fields. By the late 1980s, crop circles had spread beyond isolated rings. Fields in southern England began to display shapes that looked less like accidents and more like blueprints. What caught researchers' attention wasn't just the beauty of the designs.
These designs was how to create a completely straight line in the dark across a cornfield.
But the mathematics hiding inside them. One of the first to treat the circles as more than curiosities was Dr. Gerald Hawkins, an astronomer and former chairman of the astronomy department at Boston University. Hawkins wasn't interested in UFOs or folklore. He focused on ratios, measurements, and geometry. He pored over aerial photographs and field surveys, measuring the diameters and distances between circles. What he found startled even skeptics. The formations weren't random. The ratios of circle sizes and spacings are lined up with the diatonic scale, the same set of whole number relationships that define the white keys on a piano. For example, one formation near Cheesefoot Head revealed a 4:3 ratio, which corresponds to a perfect fourth in music. Others revealed 5:4, a major third, and 3:2, a perfect fifth. These weren't rough approximations. The ratios repeated across multiple sites, embedded with accuracy that suggested deliberate design. Hawkins went further. While analyzing crop circle patterns, he proved new geometric theorems, relationships between circles and lines that had never been published in mathematical literature. These weren't ideas pulled from textbooks. They emerged directly from the geometry of the formations themselves. To Hawkins, this was a sign of intelligence at work. Whoever or whatever made the designs seemed fluent not only in art, but in universal mathematics. The implications were unsettling. Music and geometry are often described as universal languages, understandable across cultures and perhaps even across species. If the circles were encoding these ratios deliberately, they could represent an attempt at communication, a kind of calling card left in wheat and barley. Not everyone was convinced, though. Detractors insisted that such patterns could have easily been produced by hoaxers, aided by ropes, several lengths of boards, and surveying equipment. But according to Hawkins, the level of precision and consistency shown in various formations, especially those predating the media frenzy, was difficult to dispute. Math was, he argued, the message. By the 90s, the complexities had multiplied. Simple rings were replaced by star polygons, which in turn gave way to nested hexagons, and then by fractal spirals. These formations were related to Fibonacci sequences, prime grids, and even Mobius strips. One design near Stonehenge in 1996 spanned nearly 900 feet long and reproduced the Julia set fractal object that had recently been visualized only with computer algorithms. For mathematicians, this is an astounding leap, a recursive pattern known mainly in theory, flawlessly mapped into a field overnight. The natural question was, did the formation evolve, almost like any language developing from the elementary to an advanced level? The first circles represented basic letters, very easy for anyone to recognize, while the latter circles tended to suggest agglomerations of words, something labeled sophisticated, requiring high levels of mathematical education from natural until decipher. Had there been someone to teach, even if it meant eschewing modulation without the need for changing codes? Or were mimic circles themselves keeping up with mathematics? This debate had split the whole world. Leaving both sides aside, the number of embedded circles left quite a story to be told. These circles bore elements of diatonic ratios, fractals, and specific constants such as pi and phi in them. They were no ordinary or plain art form. They were acting as indicators of some intention. If, in case such geometry was really a language, then the message was a clear one. Somebody wanted our attention, and they were speaking in maths, that which defies culture, defies time, and defies the planet itself. But geometry was just the beginning. Soon, researchers discovered biological changes in the plants themselves, evidence that something more than boards and ropes was at work. The biological fingerprint. If geometry in the fields suggested intelligence, the biology inside the stalks hinted at something even stranger. Starting in the 1990s, researchers stopped looking only at the shapes from the air and began cutting into the plants themselves. What they found left even hardened skeptics unsettled. The key figure in this shift was Dr. William Levengood, a Michigan biophysicist who applied strict laboratory protocols to a mystery many dismissed as folklore. He collected hundreds of plant samples from inside and outside formations, always carefully bagged, labeled, and measured within hours of harvest. His question was simple: what happens to plants inside a crop circle at the cellular level? The standout anomaly was what Levengood called node elongation. Nodes are the swollen joints along a stalk just below the seed head. In ordinary crops, they vary slightly but remain within a narrow range. Inside certain circles, however, Levengood measured nodes stretched up to twice their normal length. Some stalks showed elongation of nearly 200%. The effect wasn't random. It clustered near the center of formations and tapered toward the edges, as if whatever caused it had radiated outward in a controlled burst. But it wasn't just stretching. Microscopic examination revealed tiny blowouts in the cell walls, which Levengood dubbed expulsion cavities. They looked as if steam had suddenly vented from inside the plant, rupturing it from within. This wasn't bruising or crushing, the kind of damage boards or rollers would leave. It was internal. Something had heated the plant tissue rapidly without scorching the surface. To substantiate his theory, Levengood placed the control stalks in the laboratory and subjected them to pulses of microwave energy. The result was nearly perfect: elongated nodes, ruptured cell walls, and tiny vent holes. He concluded that fields showed evidence of very rapid, selective heating, as if the plants were microwaved internally in a matter of seconds. Levengood's experiments didn't stop with stalks. He turned to seeds, questioning whether the sudden bursts of energy impart some long-lasting effect. In controlled experiments, he found seeds taken from circles in mature crops usually grew much better than controls: taller shoots, larger leaves, stronger roots. In some cases, there was an increase in biomass of 300 to 500%. The inverse occurred when the circles formed in immature crops. Germination was inhibited. Shoot measurements were inhibited, sometimes by a factor of 4. Same field, same crop. Depending on the timing of the circle's formation, the seeds either thrived or failed. To Levengood, the pattern was clear. Whatever made the circles interact with living plants in a way that no charlatan could fake. It wasn't only bending stalks. It altered biology on the cellular and even generational level. While he faced major challenges in his approach, everything he stood for began to pile upon the anomalies. Independent teams have found node elongation and expulsion cavities on freshly formed circles, while no such effects were detected in control areas outside of the formations. The differences faded away with time as the tissue dried up, which made them nearly impossible to fabricate. If he was right, it meant that crop circles are not just symbols on the surface, but biological evidence of a force able to heat and change plants while still leaving them somewhat intact. And that raises a much larger question. What kind of technology, human or otherwise, can accomplish such effects on hundreds of feet of crops, and even sometimes overnight? The evidence in the stalks points to something beyond human mischief. But then came a revelation that turned speculation into dialogue. Formations that seemed to reply to one of humanity's own messages to the stars. The Chilbolton and reply, and other messages. One of the most unsettling turns in crop circle research came when a field formation seemed to answer a message humanity itself had sent into space. In 1974, astronomers at Arecibo beamed a carefully constructed radio message toward Messier 13. Numbers, DNA chemistry, a stick figure, our solar system, and a diagram of the dish. That transmission was designed to be unmistakably artificial. Prime number dimensions, binary encoding, scientific constants. It set a template for how an intelligent signal might look. Fast forward to 2001. Beside the Chilbolton Radio Observatory in Hampshire, England, a vast rectangular grid appeared in a wheat field. From the air, it looked pixelated, a 73 by 23 block matrix that immediately matched the Arecibo message's prime dimensions. But it wasn't a carbon copy. Where the Arecibo grid had depicted humans and our single-stranded DNA, The Chilbolton pattern showed deliberate edits, an altered biological graphic, an extra DNA strand, atomic numbers adjusted to include silicon, and a solar system diagram highlighting 3 planets instead of 1. The lower panel resembled a transmitting device, not Arecibo's dish, but a different symbol.
Features, designs, illustrations of high complexity in crops.
One researchers linked to a crop formation from the previous year. For many investigators, the parallels were too exact to be a coincidence. The grid's binary fields translated into meaningful sequences. The layout used the same mathematical scaffolding as the Arecibo message. Dr. Horace Drew, and other coders working with aerial photos, argued the changes were not random noise but intentional modifications, a reply that understood the original format and then appended new information. If so, the implication was staggering. A signal returned in living plants on Earth, encoded in the same conventions humans use to reach the stars. Chilbolton was not the only formation that looked like communication. In 2002, the Crabwood disk carried a long binary spiral. When decoded using American Standard Code for information interchange, parts of the message read like a caution: beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. The wording was cryptic and alarming, framed as advice or warning rather than a simple introduction. Other formations at different sites and dates, embedded prime number grids, fractal instructions, or even Latin phrases that researchers interpreted as alerts. Beware the quiche, or to senses, beware. A number of caveats arise, however. Crop circle enthusiasts have had their fair share of clever hoaxes. Some formations, which at first glance seemed complicated, were later shown to have been remade by man through careful plotting with ropes and peg surveying techniques. The Chilbolton and Crabwood cases have undercover defenders and overt adversaries. Photogrammetric analysis, timing, eyewitness accounts, and on-site traces are all amid the debate. Nor could you argue that all supposed messages stand unsoiled. However, what distinguishes the most controversial formations is the list of features that recur in the highest complexity cases: prime number or binary frameworks matching interstellar messaging conventions, precise scaling and placement mapping to mathematical constants, biological and physical anomalies that laboratory tests find in some cases, and apparent responses or iterative modifications that build upon the past formations. All of these features taken together draw the focus from asking who hoaxed this towards asking what intelligence human or otherwise structured this information. The researchers working on the codes are, however, cautious in examining the evidence. For some, the patterns are taken as cultural artifacts, human attempts at hoaxing that over the centuries have grown cleverer and more sophisticated through collaboration. Others look at the repeated occurrences, the scientific constants behind them, and references to pre-existent messages, and feel that the opposite explanation needs to be entertained. They do not profess to know for sure. Instead, they propose an alternative. Someone may be deliberately conversing with us, using crop fields as the medium. Who knows our scientific language? It remains an open issue whether the Chilbolton grid and Crabwood spiral are the handiwork of humans or an acknowledgement from somewhere else. The same phenomena, the existence of these formations, expands the debate from mere geometric shapes in grain to transmitting possible messages. If indeed messages are written on fields, the standing and increasingly urgent question is not only who is sending the message, but why it is speaking in pi, prime numbers, and edited broadcasts of our own signals. If the fields are being used to answer human broadcasts, then the message is no longer a mystery of craft. It becomes a conversation. Who is on the other end? Warnings, speculation, and the unknown. As the formations grew more intricate, a new theme emerged: warnings. Some of the most famous coded circles, like the 2002 Crabwood disk, didn't just display geometry, they spelled out words. The binary translation read like a cryptic message: beware the bearers of false gifts. Much pain, but still time. We oppose deception. The tone wasn't playful, but urgent, almost prophetic. Other formations have been interpreted as referencing Trojan horses, hidden dangers, or cosmic cycles we barely understand. Speculation has filled the gap where evidence runs thin. To some, the warnings suggest extraterrestrial intelligence trying to signal across language barriers, using numbers, fractals, and binary because those are universal. Others wonder if the patterns are human-made, but inspired by subconscious drives, collective psychology, leaving messages to itself in fields of wheat. Still others caution that the warnings might not be messages at all, but projections. Humans imposing narrative on random or clever designs. Researchers proceed cautiously. Lab tests confirming plant anomalies in some circles, elongated nodes, altered seeds. But no study has conclusively laid to rest the question of non-human causation. Some government documents are still classified, while critics go out of their way to show that hoaxers can imitate such complexity, given enough planning. But the timing, escalation in design, and core crux of certain coded formations allow for a few questions that refuse to be outright dismissed. Unknowns form the heart of the mystery. Are these real warnings? If real, then to whom are they directed? Governments, scientists, or barley field walkers? The question that provides the most trouble is whether these warnings, if real, would serve to protect us or prepare us. Crop circles remain one of the most baffling mysteries of our time, blending art, science, folklore, and the unknown. What do you think these formations really mean? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into hidden mysteries, and watch the next video on your screen.